The year is 1943. The war in the Mediterranean is brutal, but for a specific group of American flyers, the fight was twofold. They battled not only the German Luftwaffe in the skies but also entrenched prejudice and institutional racism on the ground. This is the story of the Tuskegee Airmen, America's first black military aviators, known by the striking red tails of their aircraft, the Red Tails. Their existence was a radical experiment, designed by skeptics who believed black men lacked the intelligence, the nerve, or the discipline to fly in combat. Their success would not only affect the outcome of the war but would change the social fabric of the United States forever. The very foundation of the Tuskegee program was built on contradiction. While America was fighting to defeat the racist ideology of Nazi Germany overseas, its own armed forces strictly enforced a policy of segregation, based on the deeply flawed belief that African Americans were biologically unfit for the complexities of aerial combat. Before 1940, the Army Air Corps refused to accept any black applicants for pilot training. It took immense political pressure, especially from civil rights groups and the black press, to force the government to establish the segregated training program at the Tuskegee Institute in Alabama. The training itself was relentless, designed with an unforgiving standard to fail any pilot who wasn't truly exceptional. They were taught by elite instructors, and the intensity of their daily drills over the Alabama sky ensured that only the most dedicated and brilliant aviators would make it to the front lines. At the heart of this complex battle was a quiet, determined young man from Indiana, Lieutenant Charles B. Hall. Unlike the celebrated generals or commanders, Hall's legend rests on a single, defining moment, a moment that ripped the racist facade off the U.S. Army Air Forces and proved their critics utterly and irrevocably wrong. This is the story of how an ordinary man, thrust into extraordinary circumstances, flew one perfect mission that became an eternal statement for equality. The stage was set in Italy and Sicily. The American invasion, Operation Husky, was underway, and the skies over the Mediterranean were a chaotic, deadly mix of Allied and Axis fighters. The Tuskegee Airmen of the 99th Fighter Squadron were there, flying the powerful P-40 Warhawk. But for months, despite their rigorous training at the Tuskegee Institute in Alabama, they had faced a different kind of fight, the fight for respect. Senior white commanders, driven by systemic racism, publicly questioned their abilities and lobbying to have the unit pulled from combat, claiming the black pilots were ineffective and a liability. Every mission was not just about destroying German targets, it was an audit of their race. They knew, with painful certainty, that any mistake would be magnified and used as final proof of their alleged inferiority. The pressure on every single pilot in that squadron was unbearable. Failure was not an option, because failure meant proving the racists right. On July 2, 1943, Lieutenant Hall took off from a dusty airfield in North Africa for a routine bomber escort mission over the Sicilian coast. He carried the weight of a nation's skepticism and the hope of millions. Hall's mission was to protect the slower, heavier bombers from enemy harassment as they struck the German-held port of Castelvetrano, Sicily. It was a standard operation until a fierce dogfight erupted. Suddenly, the sky was filled with chaos. The German response was aggressive, with fast and deadly Focke-Wulf Fw 190s, one of the best fighters in the Luftwaffe, slicing through the bomber formation. The aerial combat was intense, requiring not just bravery, but intricate, coordinated maneuvers, the very complexity that critics claimed the Tuskegee pilots could not handle. The P-40 Warhawk, though robust, was less maneuverable than the Fw-190, requiring Hall to rely purely on tactical superiority and disciplined precision to gain the advantage against the superior enemy aircraft. In the heat of the action, Hall spotted one of the Fw-190s. The German pilot focused entirely on the vulnerable B-25 bombers. Hall knew this was his chance, not just for the mission, but for the entire squadron's future. He broke formation, peeling off into a sharp dive, his P-40 Warhawk shaking from the strain. He followed the textbook procedures drilled into him at Tuskegee, focusing entirely on speed, angle, and marksmanship, a demonstration of the professional discipline that his commanders had doubted. Hall moved into a perfect position on the German fighter's tail. He squeezed the trigger. The P-40's machine guns roared, sending a deadly stream of fire across the 190's fuselage. The German plane was struck instantly, smoke poured from its engine, and the pilot, realizing his plane was fatally hit, bailed out. Hall watched the parachute bloom against the Sicilian sky. The German Fw-190 spiraled into the Mediterranean Sea. It was a perfect kill, and it was documented by his wingman. No one else in the 99th Fighter Squadron had yet achieved this feat. Hall's radio crackled with the urgent, high-pitched voice of his squadron commander, Colonel Benjamin O. Davis Jr. "Did you get him, Hall? Did you get him?" Hall, calm and collected, replied simply, "Roger, sir. I got the son of a gun." Hall's single victory was not just a tally mark on a scoreboard, it was a devastating political blow to the racist elements within the U.S. Army Air Forces. Up until that point, the High Command was actively seeking reasons to justify removing the Tuskegee Airmen from combat, claiming they were wasteful or incompetent. The Air Corps had even issued a damaging report claiming the 99th was ineffective, a report that fueled attempts to disband the unit. This single, verifiable kill, with a downed pilot witnessed by others, entirely discredited that report. It was undeniable proof that the black pilots were just as capable, just as brave, and just as deadly as any other airman. The moment Hall landed, his P-40 surrounded by nervous and eager ground crew, the atmosphere was electric. The news spread like wildfire through the segregated ranks. The pressure that had been crushing the squadron for months suddenly lifted. Hall was immediately debriefed. His testimony was meticulous and confirmed by other pilots. The victory was real. The reaction from the top brass was immediate and dramatic. The news traveled up the chain of command faster than any supply chain. General Dwight D. Eisenhower, the Supreme Commander of the Allied Forces, sent a personal message of congratulations, a rare and crucial gesture of validation. The white press, which had largely ignored the Tuskegee Airmen, was now forced to report the monumental achievement. For the first time, images of Tuskegee pilots in cockpit were printed alongside glowing reports of their performance, replacing the negative or indifferent coverage that had preceded the victory. The symbolic value of that Fw-190 sinking into the sea was immeasurable. It didn't just earn Hall a distinguished flying cross, it earned the entire 99th Fighter Squadron, and all future Tuskegee Airmen, the right to remain in the fight. The unit stayed in combat, and the pilots who followed Hall continued to amass victories, forever silencing the baseless claims of incompetence. To honor the momentous victory, the officers of the 99th threw an impromptu celebration at their base officers' club, a segregated Tentan facility in North Africa. It was a moment of pure, unadulterated triumph, a release of tension that had built up over years of slights and struggle. The scene inside the club was a joyous explosion of relief and pride, filled with toasts to Hall and to the future of the squadron. The pilots, heroes who risked their lives daily, were basking in the knowledge that they had finally succeeded against both the Luftwaffe and the skepticism of their own military leaders. Then came the extraordinary contrast that highlighted the absurdity of the Jim Crow laws still plaguing the U.S. military. Colonel Davis Jr. arranged for Hall to fly to the command headquarters for an official reception. There, Hall was introduced to a high-ranking British officer. The British officer, oblivious to the strict racial segregation of the American military, immediately invited Hall to join him for a celebratory drink at the local White American Officers Club, a facility Hall was strictly forbidden from entering. Hall, a decorated hero of the United States, stood outside the door of the White Officers Club. The British officer, bewildered by the refusal, insisted. The embarrassment was palpable. The American liaison was forced to explain the humiliating reality. The hero who downed an enemy plane could not share a beer with his Allied comrades due to the color of his skin. The British officer was reportedly furious, calling the practice unbelievable. This moment served as a stark, unavoidable mirror, showing the Allied world the hypocrisy of fighting a war for freedom overseas while enforcing blatant inequality at home. Hall's personal triumph was immediately followed by a profound personal slight. Hall's heroism, recognized by the highest Allied commander, was still insufficient to override the arbitrary and humiliating rules of race. He had defeated the German Luftwaffe, but he could not defeat the segregation built into his own army. Hall's single victory did not instantly erase racism, but it created an irreversible momentum. Following his success, the 99th Fighter Squadron was given more, not less, combat time. This led to increased opportunities for the subsequent groups of Tuskegee Airmen. The 99th soon transferred to the European theater, joining the newly formed 332nd Fighter Group, which would become the famous Red Tails. The 332nd quickly established a reputation for exceptional skill and discipline. As the war progressed, the Red Tails gained legendary status. They transitioned to the powerful P-51 Mustang, the most capable fighter of the war, and began escorting heavy bombers on the most dangerous, deep penetration missions over Germany. The P-51, with its superior range and speed, allowed them to fly escort all the way to Berlin. This exposure cemented their reputation for professionalism and dedication. Flying the P-51, the Red Tails adopted a signature tactic. They stayed tightly glued to the bombers, refusing to chase enemy fighters for personal glory. This fierce dedication, often in defiance of standard fighter doctrine, quickly led to the unprecedented statistic: no bomber escorted by the Red Tails was ever lost to enemy fighters on deep penetration missions. The bomber crews, usually white, began specifically requesting the Red Tail escorts. Why? Because the Tuskegee Airmen were famous for their discipline, they stuck close to their bombers and were renowned for losing fewer escorted bombers than any other unit, a statistic often cited as proof of their exceptional commitment. The legend of the Red Tails, and their near-perfect escort record, was born from the initial validation provided by Charles B. Hall's first kill. The bravery of men like Charles B. Hall, who went on to complete 43 combat missions, was the foundation of this legacy. His initial success allowed the Tuskegee experiment to prove its central premise: talent, courage, and dedication have no color. Charles B. Hall's story is a profound reminder that war is often fought on multiple fronts. His legacy is not just about the Focke-Wulf he downed on a hot day over Sicily. It is about the political and social earthquake that one moment of pure professional excellence caused. The achievements of the Tuskegee Airmen became a powerful catalyst for the end of segregation in the American military. Their stellar service record was one of the key factors cited by President Harry S. Truman when he issued Executive Order 9981 in 1948, officially desegregating the U.S. Armed Forces. This executive order was a direct consequence of the undeniable proof of competence demonstrated by the Tuskegee pilots throughout the war, starting with Hall's first decisive victory. The simple, professional excellence of men like Hall forced a nation to confront its own hypocrisy. He flew, he fought, and he won, not just a battle, but a foundational argument for human equality. He was not just the first to score a victory, he was the pilot who broke the sky and changed the course of history on the ground. A true hero who defeated both the enemy overseas and the prejudice at home. His single moment of triumph provided the necessary leverage to prove that the merit of a soldier should always outweigh the color of his uniform.